Okay, hi everybody, and we are continuing now with what will either be an hour-long program or a half-hour program. This is program number 41 in the rules for magic for the astral plane, and we're in Rule 10, and it's the 25th program for Rule 10. It's a very long rule. Okay, we've been talking about happiness of the personality, the joy of the soul, and the bliss of the spirit, whatever that really is. So he describes, happiness here. It comes when the personality is meeting with those conditions which satisfy it in one part or other of its lower nature, maybe even in the totality of the personality. It comes when there is a sense of physical well-being, of contentment with one's environment, or surrounding personalities, which is largely an astral reaction, discussed in the light of the soul, that we should be content in the circumstances in which we find ourselves, or of satisfaction with one's mental opportunities and contacts. One can be frustrated in any one of these areas, and or one can be gratified and therefore at least happy about that, even if not happy in all aspects of the personality. But we go on here, page 370, when, however, we seek to live as souls, the contentment of the lower man is discounted, and we find joy in our group relations and in bringing about those conditions which lead to the better expression of the souls we contact. So joy, the quality of it, excuse me, is rising as we advance, seek to live as souls, and receive some of that soul energy which changes the quality also of our personality life. This bringing of joy to others in order to produce conditions in which they may better express themselves may have a physical effect as we seek to better their material conditions, or an emotional effect as our presence brings to them peace and uplift, or an intellectual result as we stimulate them to clarity of thought and understanding. Well, the Tibetan is speaking of himself here so much. Look at all he has done along these lines. And probably we have some experience of doing this as well. Maybe, right, on all three levels, but probably very much on the psychological level, affecting the astral body. And since we are students of this great teaching, then also the mental, intellectual result as thought and understanding come to our students and those we work with. But the effect upon ourselves is joy, for our action has been selfless and non-acquisitive, and not dependent upon the aspirant's circumstance of worldly state. So this is so good because it shows you how to cultivate joy in your life. But the effect upon ourselves is joy, for our action has been selflessness, or at least the selflessness in which the lower self is discounted somewhat or ignored even. Our action has been selfless and non-acquisitive, and not dependent upon the aspirant's circumstance or worldly state. In other words, we don't want anything from this aspirant, this fellow student, fellow disciple, whatever. We don't want anything except their greater welfare. And that, I'm sure we've had the experience of seeing the uplift we may have brought, and that resounds as joy within us, the sounding joy. Much happiness is necessarily foregone when ill health makes its presence felt, as the environment is difficult and the accumulated karma of many births presses down. Isn't that, so Saturnian, the pressure? Or as the troubles of the family, nation, or race weigh upon the sensitive personality. Whoop, there I go again. Sensitive personality of the of these of the of the student of these matters. The happiness of youth, where there's just exuberant energy, and Saturn has not quite hemmed us in, and it seems that we can accomplish anything so that the desired body can be fulfilled. The happiness of youth, or the self-centered contentment of the insulated person, hiding himself behind the shield of his protective desires, must not be confounded with joy. So here we have, in a way, what okay, so what joy is not. Many, sometimes I look at television, I see all these young people, and I say, oh, they all look so happy, maybe in their presentation on television. But they have that exuberance that comes from not having to parcel out and be economical about your energy, which goes away, I think, as you get much older, with a self-centered contentment of the insulated person who doesn't really care about what's going on around him or of the difficulties of those around him, because he's just into his own desires and the fulfillment of them. This is not joy. But always the uplift of others is involved with joy. And that we really have to think about this, to see what state it is that we are in. Because one of these three states will characterize us, or perhaps the complete absence of them, or not complete, but partial absence of them. We will find ourselves burdened with discontent over the state of our personality, or maybe discontent over how we can reach people and help. By the time we get to bliss, it's quite another matter, because we have to pass through joy and the soul experience, which can radiate and uplift. It is a platitude as well as an occult paradox to say that in the midst of profound personality distress and unhappiness, the joy of the soul may be known and felt. But I suppose if in the mind, because joy is experienced in the mind, we realize that the good is being done. I'm reminded of the book A Tale of Two Cities, where the hero of that gives up his life for others, and he's on the way to the guillotine. It is a far, far better thing that I do now than I've ever done. Something of that nature is his thought. So the joy of the soul may be known and felt. And let's remind ourselves of that in the midst of personal frustration, even. And that's quite a step. If despite personal frustration, one can experience the joy. Such, however, is the case, and it is for this that the student must aim. So practical, friends. I'm just, it's been a long time since I've really paid a lot of attention to this book. Of course, references come, and I collect references and study topically and all of that, but to really go through the book carefully, what a wonderful treasure. Some people are happy because they shut their eyes to truth or are self-hypnotized, hiding themselves within a shell of illusion. They repeat certain mantras and so forth, and it's kind of a pretense. They don't see. I remember dealing with some Christian scientists along that line, but they were firm in not listening to what I considered reason. But the aspirant has frequently reached the stage wherein the eyes are wide open. He has learnt to speak truth to himself and has built up no separating wall between himself and others. He is awake and alive. He is sensitive and frequently suffering. He wonders why apparently what the world calls happiness and peace have left him, and asks what is to be the outcome. So this is the state, often the state of the aspirant. So we must discriminate between what is real joy. It always has that element of the group, of the other, an element of self-forgetfulness, which negates the pain of the present circumstance. Okay. We who watch and guide on the inner side, and one day we will be such, he tells us, be patient, learn to be patient, because there's not much of a response sometimes, a very slow response to the inner promptings by those on the outer side. One has to not lose courage as one tries to reach and influence. We who watch and guide on the inner side, watch with loving care all of you who struggle in the thick of the fray. Now, if we are honest, the fray is still going on. We, that is the masters here, are like the general headquarters staff who follow the course of the battle from a secure eminence. We might say only allowed because they have been in the battlefield before. You don't work your way up to general by not being a soldier in some life anyway. Okay, so only allowed because they have been in the battlefield before. In our security lies your ultimate success, for we hold in our hands the solution of many problems and apply that solution when the battle goes contrary. But, we are left to ourselves a lot so that we can prove ourselves. We must be left to ourselves so we can prove ourselves and strengthen ourselves on our own merits. One thing always I would have you remember, and it is of vital importance. Well, I guess when he points this kind of thing out, we better take note. It is this statement that in the destruction of the form lies hid the secret of all evolution. It's hard to say because we work so hard to try to preserve the form. I was reading, where the cyber human being is coming, and one thinks of oneself as surviving as a bionic kind of human being with one's consciousness intact, and the outer form will be virtually indestructible. Certainly not the victim of the ills that flesh is heir to. But, the form must be preserved at all costs, and we cling to the bars of our prison. Think not this is truism, some kind of platitude. You will see it in constant application and need to be prepared for its demonstration. So I think what's being said here is, whoopsie, let me just get that correctly. Hold not too tightly to the form. Master Moria said something which is kind of amusing. He says, getting rid of the form should be of no more concern than clipping a hair off your head when you have a haircut. Doesn't hurt too much, does it? It's just quick, and you feel practically nothing. DK tells us that at the most we feel something akin to an electric shock and nothing more. So, the Black Lodge has instilled in the mind of man a great chimera, kind of horrific image of what death is, and the fear of death has held us for millennia. But DK tells us it's going to be a very familiar experience, and just think how many times we, even as human beings, have passed through it, and as animals, and as universes. Every universe dies at some point, goes into pralaya, and we are that universe. Well, that takes it into a pretty big philosophical expansion. The masters use the form to the uttermost. They can really preserve it as long as it needs to be preserved. Master R seems to be a great expert in this. They seek to work through it, imprisoning the life in confining walls for just as long as the purpose is served and the race instructed through that form. So basically, we're being told, use the form, but for the good of all, but do not become a fearful prisoner of that form, which, so many human beings are. We talk to all kinds of people, but it's very easy to talk to those who have a fear of death and have no hope and have maybe even a brilliant mind which has convinced them that they are a blip of consciousness in the midst of eternity, and all there is in the future is nothing for them. Only immediate experience will dissuade them of that point of view. Then the time comes that the form no longer serves the purpose intended, when the structure atrophies, crystallizes, and becomes easily destructible. The word of death, the mind repeats that word, and then the principle of mind organizes itself and then repeats that word. The form drops away, the soul stands free. Something like that. It's the 10th law of healing. Its destruction then becomes the matter of greatest concern and usefulness, and it goes whilst a new form takes its place, and we might just say, cyclically. Well, we get so used to coming and going, that ability to come and go probably is related to Neptune and to the opening of the 6th petal. And it is an ability we all want to have. And DK tells us, learn to fall asleep consciously, because that will help you in the death process. Watch and see. If this be not so, the new form will take its place. Well, we have to watch and see. We have to become very aware, very conscious of the reincarnation process. Humanity has suffered a lot, and suffered through its ignorance, and suffered through its rejection of the good law and the good teaching, perfect laws, which were given back in Lemurian times. But the psychology of the rebel is the psychology of our planetary logos, the divine rebel, and we have inherited something from the great being in whom we live and move and have our being, this rebelliousness, And he hints at a rebellion that occurred in the previous solar system, maybe where some of us were involved. Then the time comes that the form no longer serves the purpose intended. So always the building of the form, always its utilization for as long as possible, and sometimes, they have kept the form alive, as in the case of HPB, in the case of Alice Bailey. They have their ways of preserving and vitalizing the form until the forces of karma just become irresistible, or maybe until the task is complete. One gets the sense that Alice Bailey's assigned task was completed, but maybe not so much HPB. Maybe there was more that could have been written and was planned, but she submitted herself to such tremendous pressure, Anyway, always the building of the form, always its utilization for as long as possible, always the destruction of the form when it hinders and cramps the expanding light, always then the rapid reconstruction of a new form. This is the law of periodicity or reincarnation on the human level. Periodicity. Such has been the method since the commencement of the eon, and maybe the eon is the, we might say perhaps this represents the incarnation of our planetary logos, or something even greater. The thing is, he does really leave these time units undescribed. Manvantara is a term, indicates a cycle. There are different kinds of rounds. We don't know how long each one of them takes. A term like the eon is used to indicate, I think, a very long cycle, but we don't know which. And I think, this science of cycles is very well guarded. And it's one of the last things we're going to find out in the usual table of cities or powers, because it resides on the third subplane of the atmic plane, which is in a way a mental plane, and it's called all knowledge. Well, it can't be all knowledge, but it can be all knowledge with respect to our planetary globe, or maybe chain. I don't know how far it extends. I don't know if it really means all knowledge with respect to the planetary scheme, but it certainly alerts us to the vastness of the knowledge which can be accumulated. In the infancy of the race, the forms endured for a long time. And, so maybe we see this in the Bible. We also see references to giants, and we see primitive forms of life living for a long time. Maybe, reptiles and others. Evolution moved more slowly, but now on the upward trend of things, the form has but short duration, and it's going to be even shorter. More short to come. Okay, let's just see about that. Oopsie. Okay. Shorter to come. It lives vitally for a brief period. It moves with rapidity and then is succeeded by another form. This rapidity will increase, not decrease, as the consciousness or inner expansion of the life of the race vibrates ever to a faster and lighter rate of rhythm. So the oscillation increases in rapidity. How do you spell that? Okay, it's gonna oscillation increases in rapidity, and the attempt to preserve the present form forever is ill-advised. Well, we have to learn about the inner worlds. We have to enter incarnation and be rapidly connected with our sense of purpose, find the best way to fulfill that purpose, and then leave when there's nothing further of a constructive nature to be done. Well, this seems a long way from the present fearful attempt to make the form last forever, even if that form is bionic. Okay, well, we know very little about the inner occult life and must be in a position to know more and to have people know more in a graded manner so that their sense of values can change. We must learn now to value consciousness over the coherence of the gross physical form. All may go well, and that gross physical form be unscathed for a long time, and departure from it may be an easy matter, but then what has been accomplished for the sake of consciousness? That's the question. It is necessary likewise that you arrive at the realization that one of the principal objects of endeavor at the present time on the part of those you call the elder brothers of the race is to stimulate, purify, and to coordinate the etheric body. Well, we would expect this in a seventh ray age, wouldn't we? It's going to be, the seventh ray has very much to do with the etheric body, and we're entering the time of emphasis for it, and there will be, we are told, much healthier bodies under the reign of the seventh ray, because we'll be able to remove those etheric miasmas which are precipitating into the dense physical body as disease. And the prana, which is life-sustaining, will be better received. And that's the solar prana, pretty much, isn't it? Because we're not talking so much about the prana that's received through the pores, which is more planetary prana, but that which is received as radiant heat from the sun. Not latent fire, but radiant fire. This etheric body is not only the transmitter of prana, but is the medium for the energies which we are considering. So many energies gather in the etheric body, including great sustaining energies from above. So its importance also lies in other directions. So let's just talk about here the importance of the etheric body. A, being of physical plane matter, though refined, literally, etheric consciousness is the next step ahead for the race. Now, sometimes he says there is no etheric consciousness, and at other times that there is. Certainly there will be an awareness of the condition, of the presence and condition of the etheric body. This will demonstrate it first as the ability to see etherically and cognize etheric matter, and already one can see this developing on a fairly large scale amongst disciples. And who knows what other people, not technically calling themselves disciples. The general refinement of the etheric body and of the physical body, and the physical brain is coming, and with it will come this type of etheric sight. Okay, going on, point B. It is the field of exploration immediately ahead of the modern scientist. Already this is happening. In 10 years' time, many medical practitioners will be recognizing it as a fact of nature. Perhaps they did not talk about it too expansively. You know, orthodoxy always has its revenge against those who are pioneers, and just try to present the new paradigm to somehow crash into the old paradigm, and there will be resistance because you might have to give up a life's work, and you might have to look at the time you spent fortifying an illusion, and it's not very easy on the lower ego, to do that. Everything you think is true is challenged. And you don't have too much time because you only believe in one life anyway. So you'd rather be comfortable in your thoughts and think that you maybe have achieved something instead of having to reorganize the whole thing, and say, how have I spent my days defending an illusion? Point number, C. Most of the diseases that the physical body suffers from at present have their roots in the etheric body. There are few, if any, purely physical diseases. Disease has its source in astral and etheric conditions, and not yet so much in mental conditions, because the race is not there yet. Not so much in mental conditions. So we want to look deeper, there are energy flows which are going to affect the dense physical body. If there's congestion, if there's overstimulation in the etheric body, if there's a dearth or lack of stimulation, atrophy may develop. So it's the etheric balance which has to be understood. And in an age where the seventh ray is coming in, and in a book like A Treatise on White Magic, which deals a lot with the etheric body, we have to consider its causal position with respect to the physical body. The secret of safe and sane clairvoyance and clairaudience depends upon the purification of the etheric vehicle. To not, let's just say, not to distort what is impressed. That's kind of interesting. You would think you would have to purify the astral vehicle. Well, I'm sure you do, as we get rid of the various glamours that beset us and beset the race. But there's something about receiving this in the brain consciousness in an undistorted way that depends upon the etheric body. So if we are to receive impression in the brain consciousness in a manner undistorted, a clean, pure, vibrant etheric body is required. Okay. The etheric emanations of people can be great contaminators. In the purification, therefore, of this body lies the secret of a sweeter and saner humanity, uncontaminated by contact with many people who spread the contamination. Well, I'm remembering one of my friends who, I can't be too specific, but he was a distinguished psychologist, and he was working with another very distinguished psychologist, and he said, well, this was the condition of the etheric body of the latter, which affected the former. He says, well, this individual, he had an etheric leak, and when I was with him, that kind of pulling on my etheric body occurred, and I always felt devitalized after our sessions together. Well, maybe that's not contamination, but it certainly is one etheric body affecting another. So, okay, this bioelectric field, if we want to use more contemporary terminology, is of the utmost importance. It is causal. It is noumenal compared to the physical body. It is substantial compared to the physical body, and the source in its imbalance and clogging and overstimulations and all that of much disease of the organs in the physical body. So we have to deal with disease at its cause. Now, a lot of those congestions and overstimulations may be the result of the desire nature, and then we'll have to trace it back even further. So we will find that in the change of character and intending to the condition of certain of the subtle vehicles, better health of the dense physical body will result. So after all, things are psychosomatic in a way, and according to our subtle inner conditions, so will be the outer demonstration. I think already we are accepting that idea. Hence the importance of the etheric. There are many other reasons which will later be emphasized. In beginning to form your ideas on the subject, however, it is the part of wisdom to adhere to wide generalities until the whole matter has taken clear shape in your mind. Otherwise, what can happen? We get, let's just say, no, let's say not. We enter into too much detail before we really see the necessary relationships. So we have to be patient to see the larger picture and to realize that for us it's not given to know all the details, but the general picture. Of course, Master DK has presented in this book so very much detail, we might think we're being given the detail, but I think compared to what will later be presented, we will see that we're actually being given the ABCs. Work on the etheric body, however, from the standpoint of the hierarchy, is not confined to the bodies of men. It is a planetary process. Well, everything is connected. And the health of the human etheric body will depend on the condition of the planetary etheric body, which these days I think is very much challenged. The etheric body of the earth itself is being subjected to a definite stimulation. Well, sometimes the earth actually even represents in the energy system of man the etheric body. I think we can find a reference to that in the earlier pages of esoteric astrology. A number of the planets can be assigned to different chakras. The earth can be assigned to the base of the spine, absolutely. To the etheric body, I do believe, and perhaps the spleen can be assigned to the mental unit, with Venus taking the role of the monastic permanent atom. There are many and flexible assignments of these systemic centers to the different chakras of man. And of course, the earth is related to the throat center, he tells us. The etheric body of the earth itself is being subjected to a definite stimulation. I suppose it's because we, here on this planet and in this chain, are passing through an initiation. It's the fourth initiation of a kind, of a lesser kind. Go to Cosmic Fire, page 384, and you'll kind of see the layout there and how DK explains it. The spirit of the earth, that, it depends on how he uses the word spirit. Sometimes it does mean the planetary logo, sometimes it doesn't. And in this case, it doesn't. The spirit of the earth, that mysterious entity, not the planetary logos, is being vivified in a new sense, and in this vivification, many interesting developments eventuate. Okay, so this is let's just say, a lower being, still involutionary, not evolutionary, involutionary. Yeah, the entity, the entity of the earth, sometimes called the spirit of the earth, and I have seen maybe the word spirit is capitalized when it does mean the planetary logos, but it has been used, it seems to me, in both ways, at least as I remember it. So the spirit of the earth, and that of course includes the the physical body and the etheric body, and maybe the general elemental nature of the personality of the planetary logos. When he talks about Earth, you never quite know whether he's talking about our particular globe, which has its own globe lord, which obviously has its own monad, or the greater chain lord, or Earth as the scheme. So you have to look at the context and see what he might be meaning here. So there's a vivification. Okay, so what is the nature of this vivification of the spirit of the earth? Okay, by an increased rate of vibration of the etheric atoms caused by the coming in of the ceremonial ray. Well, that's to be expected, because wherever there's a stimulation coming from a certain type of being with its ray structure, there will be a stimulation or a heightening of the vibratory rate of those lesser material factors which correspond with that greater being whose day has come. So this must not be pictured as a sudden or violent change. I almost read the word violet change. He says that violet has a violent reaction upon the etheric body. From the standpoint of the human student, and there are others, the rate of increase is apparently so slow and gradual as to be inappreciable. It can be a lot slower than the heating up of the earth at the moment and the rising of the levels of the oceans. We have a lot environmentally, from a seventh ray perspective, to deal with. Nevertheless, the stimulation exists, and in the course of centuries will be recognized, and this will make possible a greater ability to see ethers. I think somewhere he tells us that stimulation makes them more visible, and there are certain changes occurring in the eye as well. So the stimulation of the etheric atoms, this is one of the factors in the stimulation of the general spirit of the earth, and by the play of certain astral forces on the etheric body that lead to slow but definite changes in the internal structure of the atom. The coming into consciousness of another of the spirillae, which one? Fifth, and a general tightening up of the whole cosmos of the atom. Well, he's okay, so DK is being vague and general. And we will not know the details. Okay, we will not know the details, but let's just say the structure of the atom, of the etheric atoms, is being changed, and maybe also of astral atoms. Astral forces working on the etheric body that lead to slow but definite changes in the internal structure of the atom, the coming into consciousness of another of the spirillae. I suppose this other spiral will vibrate more intensively, and therefore the state of consciousness associated with it be noticed, and maybe this will facilitate the emerging of the fifth kingdom of nature. Okay, and here's another thing, the Mahachohan being associated with the third ray and the seventh ray, and with matter in general, or what we call matter, by the use on the inner planes by the Mahachohan of one of the powerful talismans of the seventh ray. The Mahachohan is now the Master R, and he's a third ray monad and seventh ray soul. Seems a reasonable estimation. Okay, so these are the three factors. This talisman is one of the factors. All this we have nothing to do with, These big changes are occurring eternally, and we are living in the world of effects. But okay. But the play of certain astral force upon the etheric body leads to a slow but definite changes in the internal structure of the atom. And, well, if we could see as DKCs from the inside out, then, we'd really know what he's talking about, but at least we have the general picture. All right. So all of this is about what is the nature of the vivification of the spirit of the earth. Increased vibration, changes in the structure of the atom, etheric atoms presumably, but there are many types of atoms. Certainly on the cosmic physical plane, it's all atomic, underlay by the bubbles in the koilon, as they're called. And then a great talisman on the seventh ray. And a talisman, well, let's say, a talisman will organize matter according to seventh ray patterns. Okay, the spirit of the earth, it might be noted, is of slow and gradual arousing. He, it, whatever is on the involutionary arc and passes on to the evolutionary in some dim and distant future. We don't even know, is this in our, let's just say, in our solar system or in the next? Okay, who knows? There, maybe DK knows, and some of them know it. It's quite a primitive being, and I suppose represents very much the matter aspect, and is much composed of the matter inherited from maybe the moon chain or the previous solar system, all of that needing to be redeemed. Therefore, he will not carry us with him. Well, that's interesting. That's a hint. We will have moved on in evolution and will not be associated any longer with the inhibitory states of matter which he rules and of which he is comprised. But he serves our purpose now. It's a redemptive purpose, and requiring let's see, RQG, perhaps. Yeah, and requiring an opposition. An opposition, ATOWM, against which to strengthen our abilities. Okay. So, a redemptive purpose requiring RQG, an opposition against which to strengthen our abilities, offering us a home within his body yet remaining dissociated from us. So we wish they wouldn't disappear like that. We utilize the material. So we utilize the material constituents of his body. The devas of the ethers from this very stimulation are correspondingly hastening forward in evolution and approximating also nearer to their ideal. So these particular devas are evolutionary lives. Yeah. Well, it's a mysterious being, and he does deal with it somewhat in the Treatise on Cosmic Fire and elsewhere. Imagine what it is to have that kind of knowledge and really see where mankind fits in this evolutionary and also involutionary scheme, and how involutionary lives can assist evolutionary lives. In all I have said anent the etheric body of men, anent the planet, anent the spirit of the earth, the crux of the whole situation lies in the fact that the 5 rays at this time have the 7th as their predominating ray. Well, are we talking about the 5 rays of Brahma? Because from the atomic plane on down, we are dealing with Brahma and Vishnu on the monadic plane, and Shiva on the sea of fire, the first plane, Logoic. So there's a rotation here, I suppose, and in different ages and at different times, different rays come to the apex of the 5-pointed star. So the 7th is on top now, and we'll all have to get used to getting along with that particular ray. And he tells us that only the 6th ray monads will have problems. Did you even think that there were 6th ray monads when he tells us there's only 3? But it depends on the context. There's 7 in one context and 3 in another. The 7th ray is the ray that controls the etheric and the devas of the ethers, presumably also the evolutionary devas. And sometimes, when a deva is involutionary or of low quality, we call it an elemental, and sometimes a deva. It controls the 7th subplane of all planes, the lowest or maybe the highest, but it dominates at this time the 7th subplane of the physical plane, of the systemic physical plane. Well, this would be the dense physical body of the dense physical body of man, but perhaps also the dense physical body of the planetary logos, which consists of 18 lower subplanes. A lot of sort of 5th ray stuff, to get under our belt here. But once we memorize a few of the lists and associations, the vocabulary, it's not as difficult as it seems, not as burdensome as it seems at first. Being in the 4th round also, we are here in this chain. When a ray comes into definite incarnation, it not only controls on planes of the same number, but has a special influence on the 4th subplane. All this because of the round, and I've been putting italics in, and I see that gosh, well, not a month ago quite, but I completed my italics run here, and I need to go further. But I think we're not going to go any farther here than the founding of the hierarchy. This sounds amazing. Maybe we'll learn about the Temple of Ibez and what it is in South America that is so derivative of the early hierarchical shambolic influence. We find so many things there that seem to point to an earlier, wiser age. And it's interesting that the jungle is now being penetrated by certain types of photographic machines, which, well, somehow they can detect the many, many cities, ancient cities, and so forth that lie buried in the jungle. And I think that before long, this temple of Ibez and what it was and what it meant to Shambhala 17 million years ago or so will be more emergent in the consciousness of the human race. So anyway, note how this works at this time. So the seventh ray is affecting the fourth, basically. The seventh ray is affecting those aspects of the planet which correlate with the number 4, because we are experiencing the fourth round in the fourth chain. This does seem like a chain round, but maybe we're also experiencing the fourth scheme round. There do seem to be two different types, one much longer and larger than the other. So anyway, the fourth ether, the lowest of the ethers, is the next physical plane of consciousness. And there's no question here, he is definitely talking about etheric consciousness. This contrasts, with the statement that there is no consciousness on the etheric plane. How is that possible? Okay, well, we have to examine more closely. Etheric matter is even now becoming visible to some, and will be entirely visible at the end of this century to many, and perhaps they do not talk about it too much, but I know some for whom that visibility is real. Okay. The fourth subplane of the astral holds the majority of men, holds them when they pass over, and consequently much work on the greatest number can therefore be accomplished, because the 7 affects the 4, and the 7 is usually transformative. And the fourth mental subplane is the plane of Devachan, and this concept will certainly emerge in contrast to the heaven or paradise of some religions. Okay. Well, where are we now? I guess we're on page something. We're on page 374. So we have to go back to the place where all this started. And here it is. So I'm going to copy this, as I have been doing, hoping to save time thereby. And we're really going to begin a fresh subject of great interest, the founding of the hierarchy. And it'll give me a chance to complete a little more italicization. So this is the end of 41, and we've dealt with 370 to 374, and number 366 is out of the picture. And this is the 20, this should have been, well, let's just say this is the 25th, and we're going to go ahead into the 26th, and we're going to begin on page 374, and we're starting with the 42nd. I hope that does it. Okay, friends, well, interesting material, isn't it? Now, do we have the leisure for this kind of study? I mean, it does sink in slowly, but it provides a reservoir of knowledge upon which wisdom can be built. So I hope that we will take the time during these 7 years, which remain until the Great Conclave and until the giving out, or the beginning of the giving out of the new dispensation, these 7 years to assimilate and apply. Okay, thank you, and we'll see you soon. Lots of love, many blessings, and study hard.